over that student resource handbook. And then we have Jenna here today, and she's our nurse practitioner from Walsh. And so she'll have a time to kind of go over some tips and tricks with interviewing, why she got into the field, why she lives and works in rural and all of that. And then we'll have some time at the end for some additional questions. If you want to go to the next slide. So we are Colorado Rural Health Center. We usually refer to ourselves as CRHC. So if I do that out of habit, just so you know what that means, we are actually the state office of rural health. And so we are not a actual health center, but we are one of 3 that operate as a nonprofit organization. And so what that means is we have the ability to be really involved and hands-on with our clinics and hospitals, but also with our health profession programs. We do partner with federal and state and other partners to bring you those services and education. So we have connections with, the PCO, the primary care office, and all of our clinics and everything across the state. Our mission is to enhance healthcare services in the state by providing information, education, linkages, tools, and energy toward addressing rural health issues. And so we, our vision is to improve healthcare services available in rural communities and ensure that all rural Coloradans have access to comprehensive, affordable, high-quality healthcare. Next slide. So we have a lot of resources that we provide students and other health professions that are actively licensed and practicing. And originally we had them all laid out in slides for you. And then we realized it's a lot of slides. It's a lot of material to take in and to really understand. And so Stephanie Vose, who is also from CRHC and on the call today, you've probably seen some communications come in from her, put together this really great resource handbook that was emailed to you. If for some reason you didn't get it, and it's not in any of your, spam folders, anything like that, please let us know and we're happy to send that out again. But in there, it really does do a good job of breaking down in detail some of those resources that you're really going to want. So the facility designation map, what is considered rural and not. 77% of Colorado is considered rural or frontier. So it is the vast majority of the state, but those maps will indicate where our rural health clinics are, as well as our critical access hospitals. We also look at state loan repayment options in the handbook. We break it down. We do not oversee that program. That is through the primary care office, through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So we do have a contact listed in there who will work with you, who is local to the state, familiar with us and rural, and can help you get all the applications and deadlines that you need, but it does list out what that program looks like. So the service obligation, I believe, is 3 years. There's options for full-time, 3/4 time, and part-time. It also lists out all of the qualifying professional titles. Federal loan repayment, same thing. We have a contact that works with us directly. That is listed in there as well. You are more than welcome to always reach out to her directly, or you can go through us and we can make that warm handoff. Federal loan repayment options look a little bit different. There's a couple different options to choose from. So there's kind of their standard program if you're working in a HPSA designated area, but there's also other programs. I'm so sorry, that's my dog. We work from home. And so we there's other programs for substance use disorders, and if you're in a clinic that is designated as one of those SUD treatment centers. So there's a couple different options to look at there. A couple things we will say about that. You can apply for both. You cannot accept both if you are awarded both. So you're more than welcome to apply for both. The reason you can't have 2 at the same time is you can't double dip on that service obligation. So after, say, 3 years, you fulfilled that commitment, you still have loans to repay, you can then apply again. You just can't have both. The loan repayment application builders. So we know here at CRHC firsthand what they're looking for in an application, more than just what is outlined on those respective websites. So we give you some tips on, if you're a current student, for example, you might want to consider things like volunteer work. If you have the capacity to take on a research project, you might want to have that focus be in a rural or underserved population. So we give you some insider tips on really what the reviewers are looking for and kind of break that out for you. And then Stephanie, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about 3RNet. So 3RNet is our national rural and recruitment and retention network. And so each state, as well as the Indian Health Services and the Department of Veteran Affairs, have their own landing page. It is basically the Indeed of rural health. And so up there in that corner, you can see where you register for professionals. It asks you basic information as well as to upload, your CV or your resume. For those of you who are like a year out from looking for employment or less, you can indicate in there when you would be able to start. So it can account for how much of your program that you have left. So you can get started as early as a year out. We do highly recommend that you upload your resume, which I'll get into in a second. There's also a section to fill out what you're looking for and what's really important to you in employment. And that's also nice to have because our hiring managers can see that, and it really makes sure that you're connecting and finding the best fit. So I don't know, Stephanie, are you able to play this video?
Let me see. There's no sound, right?
No.
Oh, here it is. All right, playing.
So this quick video kind of walks you through. So once you're registered and logged in, you can type in your profession and specialty. You can have multiple in there. So if you are a physician assistant and you are looking at family medicine, you might also look at, say, for example, internal medicine. Sometimes facilities are willing to consider either. And then you can also add as many states as you're interested in. We obviously want to keep you in Colorado, but if you're interested outside, you can add those in. And then this is kind of what it looks like. Now, I have a limited view because I kind of oversee the page. But if you were to be logged in, you would have access to the job details, compensation and benefits, the actual community in which the clinic is located, and then the clinic itself. What do staff ratios look like? What kind of equipment do they have, or any special services they can offer? So it really gives you an in-depth view of what that position looks like. Now, again, I don't have access to that same view as you, but if you were to find a position you were interested in, there's generally a button at the top that says, I'm interested. I think it has like a little heart with it. You would press that button, and once a week, the hiring manager of that position gets a whole list of everyone who's marked interested in that position. Then they can reach out to you directly. That's why it's very important to upload your resume so that they can review that. It helps kind of speed along that process. But also we recommend not signing up with a school email because once you graduate, you will not have access to that email, and that is how they're going to reach out to you. The other thing to keep in mind, at the top there, it'll highlight if they accept J1 visas. So a few of our clinics do. It's a little harder in Colorado, but they have recently made some changes to that. So we do expect that to grow some. It also lets you know if they are enrolled in the loan repayment program. So part of it is they have to be in a HPSA designated area. The other part is they have to formally apply to receive that designation. So most of our clinics are already registered, but if you come across one that you feel does meet that criteria, it's in a rural area, and they're not offering that loan repayment, we can work with them to get them signed up. We can get them in contact with the appropriate parties. The other thing it'll tell you is what that HPSA score is. So in that resource handbook, it breaks down, and there's again that contact. The HPSA score is going to depend on if you qualify for both state and federal, or if the clinic does. Almost all of our clinics will qualify for that state level. It's a little bit harder to qualify for that federal level. They have a higher, they require a higher need in that area. So But all of that information is broken down. It's all listed in 3RNet. It is free to register. They are not recruiters. They simply are the platform. When you register, I actually am the one who gets the notification. I don't do a whole lot with it because we really want our clinics to be the ones leading that effort. They know who's going to best fit in their culture and in their company and all of that. So I get the notification, but it's really up to you to interact with the hiring managers and for them to interact with you. In the job post, there is also contact information for the hiring manager. So you're always welcome to email them directly and let them know that you saw that opportunity and you'd like to look at next steps. Some of the positions will also have a apply now link listed. So it might be through Indeed or through their website. And so you can always officially apply through that link as well.
Oh my God.
I think that is
Information.
if you want to go to the next slide. We are also hosting a rural job fair. So it is in person Wednesday, October 4th from 9 to 12 at the Regency Aurora. If you have not already signed up, it is free to attend. That QR code should get you to the registration link. We do ask that you register. As of right now, I believe we have representation from 12 or 13 of our rural clinics from across the state. They are, it is open to all health profession titles. And there's representation from critical access hospitals, rural health clinics. We also will have federally qualified health centers, a representative from there. We will also have a representative from the PCO, which will help navigate some of that state loan repayment. If you have additional questions or anything, we will have a rep there for that. So you are more than, of course, welcome to attend that event. Next slide. And then I know that was kind of fast. I really wanted to make sure Jenna had the bulk of this time because she's really going to be the one that can answer your questions and speak to why you want to work in rural. But that is our contact information for both myself and Stephanie. So if there's any questions you think of later, or if you review that resource handbook and something comes up, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are always available to answer questions. This 3RNet QR code will get you right to the link to register. And again, registration is free. We do recommend, even if you are a student, just to look and see what's out there and start making those connections with your clinics. For anyone who has to do any sort of clinical rotation, any research, anything, our clinics are also available. And so a lot of them love taking in new grads and students, and Jenna can kind of speak to some of that too. So I saw one question in the chat. We are looking at hosting another job fair. We're not sure, it'd be springtime. We're not sure if it's going to be virtual, or we also have another conference in April. So it'd be kind of one of those two, but we are looking at hosting some additional job fairs.
You're also welcome to register for the job fair. There is a field to upload your resume, and we can share that with the employers who are there on site. We'll print out hard copies and share them digitally with the employers. So that's an option too. If you can't attend in person during that time, you should still go ahead and register and upload your resume, and we'll share that out.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. I think that is all I have. So if there's any questions for the content that I kind of shared, please feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, Jenna, I think you have the floor.
Great, thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna. I'm a nurse practitioner down in Walsh. I've lived here a long time, but I've been a nurse practitioner here for about 8 years. Emily asked me to speak to you a little bit about being a provider in a rural area, how to get started in a rural area, and kind of all things rural. So that's what I'll be spending some time on today. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, a little bit about the clinic and how I came to be here. And then I have some tips and tricks for anyone that's interested in rural. So you can go ahead and move on, Stephanie. Thanks. This is just a map of Colorado I got off the internet, but there's a little star down there in the very southeast corner. That's where Walsh is. I put that on the map because nobody has heard of Walsh before. Yep, right there. We're a town of about 600 people or so, and in a county of not even 2,000. There's one other healthcare facility in our county in Springfield. It's got a hospital and a clinic and a nursing home. And here in Walsh, we have the clinic, the nursing home, the assisted living, and ambulance service. We don't have a hospital. So you can go ahead and move on, and I'll talk a little bit more about Walsh. So I copied the mission of the Walsh Medical Center. I'm going to get on mission statements just a little bit later, so I wanted to share ours. The mission of the Walsh Medical Clinic is to serve the Walsh community as a rural health clinic, striving to provide high quality, compassionate services to improve quality of life by promoting health and wellness. We are committed to strengthening this community by screening, teaching, monitoring, encouraging, and becoming a resource to all. So here in Walsh, we really want to be a resource to our community, and that's where we strive. We have patients that travel really long distances to get here, even over 100 miles. They come for the quality of care that they receive, the personal care that they receive, and they like coming. So it's worth it to drive 100 miles for them. We have just under 4,000 patients in our panel. We have 2 full-time nurse practitioners, me and a nurse practitioner named Mary, 1 part-time named Kim, and 1 medical director that is in the office once a month. He works in Johnson, Kansas, which is about 30 miles from where we are today. And we have a really interesting relationship. So our medical director is Dr. Bill Trout. He's been practicing in Walsh for a long time. His dad was actually a physician here first. Dr. Bill was raised in Africa as a missionary kid. And when it was time for their mission to be over, and his dad, Dr. Roger, was looking for a place to move and like settle his family down, he was looking where his supporters were from, and he had a supporter here in Walsh and came to visit. And he said living in Walsh is most like the relationship he has with the people in Africa. So living in Walsh is the most like living in Africa. I've never been to Africa, so I can't confirm, but that's what they've always told me. I think that's funny, a funny story. But years ago, Dr. Bill needed some help, and nurse practitioners were brand new, and he sent Kim to nurse practitioner school. Her license number it's like 3 digits long. I think mine is 7. So you can imagine she's been a nurse practitioner for a long time here. Back when nurse practitioners were brand new. And then when I joined her practice, we worked together for several years. And then 3 years ago, she went to 2 days a week, and we pulled on that other nurse practitioner, Mary. Dr. Bill is still delivering babies. And so he delivered my baby 3 years ago. He delivered me for my mother. So we have, like I said, a very tight relationship. Okay, we can move to the next slide. A little bit about me. So I was raised in Quebec County. That's how I ended up here. I went to high school here at Walsh High School. I graduated with 5 kids, me and 4 others. My senior year is kind of when my whole thought process changed, because I was going to be a music teacher or an elementary teacher my entire life. My pictures of preschool work, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'm going to be a teacher. And I lived on that for my entire life. In my junior year, I needed another science credit. So I enrolled in anatomy and physiology at my high school, and I thought that was pretty fun. And so my senior year, I was able to do some job shadowing. I still thought I wanted to be a teacher. So I was able to spend 1 hour a day at the elementary school with Mrs. Cook, being a job shadow and a teacher's aide for her. And then another hour of the day, I came to the medical clinic here and I shadowed Kim. And it's kind of a standing joke, because I still know Mrs. Cook and Kim quite well, that Kim kind of won me over, because this is really how I ended up. So my senior year, I kind of blew everybody's mind, and I decided I was going to go to school and be a nurse. And I went to Regis University in Denver right out of high school. I finished my program, and at that time when I graduated, finding a job as an RN was really hard, especially a new grad RN. And so I moved home. It's expensive to live in Denver when you don't have a job. And I started applying in rural areas more locally. I had 2 rural jobs. I worked in the Alzheimer's unit, a locked unit, and then in Ulysses, Kansas at a at a rural facility. I did ER, OR, and med surge there in about 18 months. I got a ton of wonderful experience. And then with just under 2 years of experience, I was able to go back to Denver where I worked at Swedish and start my nurse practitioner program. So then I got into nurse practitioner school and worked full time. Went back to Regis for that program, and I thought, this is perfect. I don't need to ever move home again. I'm a city girl now. I never really did fit in the city, but I'm a city girl now, and that's where I'm going to stay. Even though Kim was calling me from time to time saying, I think I'm going to need another girl here. And so it was almost the last 6 months of my program. Kim had called me midway through my program and said, I can't wait any longer. I found someone. I'm going to hire her as a nurse practitioner. And I just felt relief. Perfect. I didn't want to move there anyway, and I didn't want to disappoint this person that's been a mentor for the last few years of my life. It's not in my plan to move back home. Just a sigh of relief. Well, come to graduation, and Kim calls the week of graduation and said, that nurse practitioner has decided she needs to go be closer to her mom. She's not working here anymore. Would you consider it? So I spent several weeks studying for boards, trying to sell my townhouse in Denver, and contemplating if I was moving home. And it just seemed right. And so I moved back to Walsh in 2015, and this is where I've worked ever since. The next slide would be good, please. So reasons I like working in rural. Pros. So I have a lot of autonomy. I work in a rural health clinic, from little bitty babies, newborn babies, all the way over to the nursing home. And I don't want to say I have no oversight, because I do have a medical director who's reviewing things and he's available for consultation, but I have a lot of autonomy. And because we're so rural, so far out here, there's a lot of things that I've learned to do through continuing education, working with other providers, that I do that not every nurse practitioner does. So I went to my very first nurse practitioner conference. I had been a nurse practitioner a year, or right about a year. And I was sitting at a table where we were talking about suturing, and this nurse practitioner had been working for 8 years, and this one for 10, and this one for 15, and me for almost a year. And I had more experience suturing than anyone else at my table. And so I attribute that to working in a rural area. There's lots of farmers and ranchers. They get lots of nicks, cuts, and injuries, and they can either gray tape it or they can come here to the clinic and I sew them back together. So that autonomy, kind of that scope of practice, is really nice. I really love building relationships and having true follow-up with my patients. So I knew a lot of these people because I grew up here, but working as their medical provider, you build a different kind of relationship, for sure. So one of my favorite things is getting to see kids grow up in the clinic, and they know me, they know where I am everywhere. They ask me funny questions, and it's truly a relationship. Even when things don't go as I want them to, maybe I overlooked something and they ended up in the hospital, or they got flown out to the city because I wasn't being aggressive enough, or when the outcome is not like I would like it, I still get follow through, which is very educational for me. I think sometimes in a bigger area where you don't know everyone, those people just fall through the cracks. You never know what happened to them because they never come back to see you. Here in Walsh, I can't hide and they can't hide. So it's very educational, and I don't make the same mistakes over and over again. So that's very, very good. And people really do respect me, and I respect them. So even when the outcomes are not as we would want, I often do get those patients back because we have such a respectful relationship. It is truly a family practice. I love seeing kids for their child checks, their sports physicals, talking about school and all of the anxieties and things that go with school, all the way up to people in the nursing home. And it's kind of interesting. Just yesterday, I had a young 22-month-old in here. She had a febrile seizure, so we were doing a follow-up. And then my very next patient was that 22-month-old's great-grandmother. And they passed in the hallway. It was just kind of interesting that we're so tight-knit here. And I had kind of already mentioned the full scope of practice, that I really get to do all kinds of things, from chronic care management to acute care management, wellness visits. I do everything. So I really get to stretch my scope of practice and maximize that. I also do a lot of, I don't do specialty care, of course, but when I send people to specialists, I get their follow-up, and I'm able to build relationships with those specialists and then learn from what they're doing. So I'm able to help people a little bit closer to home. And excuse me, kind of help those people be closer to home and really expand my knowledge. I have multiple people that say go to a nephrologist for every month for a while. That's a 4-hour drive to see the nephrologist. And so after they've kind of established a plan, they come and see me and follow up with me. And I'm able to send that back to the nephrologist. We talk on the phone, and they don't necessarily have to make that 4-hour drive, particularly for some of our older people where driving in the city is very hard, or our lower income where having the money or the gas money to go up, as well as maybe get a hotel if it's going to be a long visit, kind of eliminate some of those expenses. We can go on and move to the next slide. The last thing, kind of the biggest thing I wanted to talk about was some advice. So I put at the beginning the Walsh Medical Clinic mission statement, and it was a friend of mine several years ago mentioned to me that everyone should have a personal mission statement. So I kind of took that to heart, and I developed my own personal mission statement, and I urge you all to do the same. And then as you're looking for jobs, whether it be in rural or not in rural, you can really see if your personal mission statement and the mission statement of where you're working jive. Now, not every facility, everyone has a mission statement, or most have a mission statement, but that's not always the true mission of the clinic. And so I think it's good to go and meet people in the community, and then you can kind of get a feel for if their mission meets their mission statement, if that makes sense. People in rural communities are pretty proud of where they live typically, and they like talking about it. You come to Walsh, they're going to tell you our unique story about our grocery store. Our grocery store closed many years ago, and there was no one who could open it or wanted to take on the project of opening it. So a board of directors bought it, and it's shareholders. So it's owned by the community. A group of shareholders own our community grocery store. So it's just kind of an interesting thing about Walsh, and every community has something that's interesting. And those little tidbits are what make rules special. When you're driving down Main Street, you're going to see a building that it doesn't look questionable, but it's not a beautiful brand new King Soopers. And so knowing the background and then meeting the people inside and how proud they are of it is really what draws people into a place like Walsh. So as you're applying for jobs, or you're putting your resume out on 3RNet, I really recommend that you go to a community and don't simply look it up on a map. You have to look it up on a map to get there, but then if they reach out to you, you go and visit, meet them, stay overnight, ask them where to stay, ask to shadow for some time in the clinic, and that'll give you insight if the people working in that clinic match that mission statement and doesn't meet your mission statement. You get to see interactions between providers and patients in the clinic and get a feel for those special relationships that are forming or have formed over many, many years. One thing from living in rural that we know is that we know as people in rural America that if you move your family here and your family if your family is happier, you will be happier. And so we want your family to also be a fit into our community. So take your family with you. Of course, they don't have to shadow in the clinic and all of that, but they need to see the community as well. My last piece of advice can be the most difficult, but it's to find a mentor. So mentors are really what has gotten me through the last 8 years of my life in Kim and Dr. Bill. That mentorship started really early, and but they're my mentors. I call them when I have good days. I call them when I have bad days. I've called Dr. Bill and said, I have no idea. I'm totally lost. What do I do next? And he just walks me through it. And so those mentors are wonderful. Maybe they're in the community where you're applying or thinking about applying. Maybe they're from school, but having a mentor is a really important part. Another nurse practitioner told me being a nurse practitioner can be a little isolating. Your RN friends that you've worked with on the floor for a long time, you get kind of a tight knit because you work so closely. And then you become a nurse practitioner and you're thinking on a different level as an RN, and that relationship kind of has to adjust. It doesn't mean it breaks, but it adjusts. And so it can be really different to go from being in a tight knit community to being a nurse practitioner and kind of stepping out. Build relationships with other providers. So like I alluded to earlier, I have a nephrologist who I work with very closely. I have his cell phone number. I call him with questions. I have developed over 8 years relationships with specialists. I can text them patients that I haven't even seen and just say, hey, what lab should I get? Because they can't get into your office for a week. What lab should we do? What meds should we stop? And one of my biggest fears when I was in nurse practitioner school is that I would be made to be felt like I was less than, say, a cardiologist or a nephrologist. And I have found people in my world that don't make me feel less than, and I can ask those questions without seeming like I'm less smart, if that makes sense. Because that's not a feeling I like to feel. I've seen a couple of questions.
Yeah, Jenna.
For me.
Emily and I have addressed most of the questions so far, except the last two.
Okay.
Hannah asked, is this mission statement something you would include in a resume?
I think that's up to you. I think my personal mission statement, I could modify to be something that I would be open to sharing with a potential employer. And sometimes it might seem a little personal. So maybe it's something you don't want to share right off the bat. But that may be, especially if you feel like it aligns when you're looking at jobs, to share right off the bat.
Okay. The other question is related to loan repayment for people with an acute care nurse practitioner degree. So we can connect them with the right resources and people to answer that.
Yeah,
but if anybody else has any questions, feel free to unmute your microphone. You can ask them, or you can type it in the chat. If you hover over, it's either at the bottom of the screen or the top. A toolbar will appear with the microphone icon, and you can mute and unmute yourself. If you're joining by phone, I believe it's *6 to mute and unmute yourself. So feel free to throw your questions in here for Jenna.
And I can actually jump in really quick. So for the question regarding nurse practitioners and the focus on family med. So a lot of programs and resources are directed more at the family med providers, mostly because in rural areas, that tends to be what the population has the most access to. So they are growing programs and getting more resources to specialties. However, as it stands for loan repayment, for the state level loan repayment, it is just if you are a physician assistant. They don't specify if you have to be family med or other specialties. So a physician assistant alone would work. Same as a nurse practitioner. So they don't specify that for the I'm so sorry. For the national loan repayment for physician assistants, they do require you either be adult, family, pediatric, women's health, or geriatrics. Same thing for nurse practitioners. And there's some additional programs, again, for anyone who has that substance use disorder or is working in an area that is fighting that opioid epidemic. And there is a full list, and we can drop those links, but there is a full list on the loan repayment websites that lays out all those included titles.
Hey, this is Will. I just kind of following up, I guess, on that comment. Would an area that like clearly would fall into the category of fighting like a substance use issue within its population would meet the demographic requirements for the loan repayment. But if you were saying working as like a mid-level in the emergency room. I mean, that's I mean, ultimately like what my main goal is in a critical access rural hospital that sees, and treats regular, drug and substance abuse related issues. Would that qualify, I guess, is my specific question.
So they have to kind of like the same process of becoming a qualified HPSA designated area. They do have to apply to have that specific SUD treatment center qualification. So it's something that can go through the National Health Service Corps, and we can, if you have a site in mind, we can share that information. But they essentially would just reach out to that contact. Ashanti Butcher is her name. She is listed in that handbook. And she goes out and can deem a facility and give them that designation, but they do have to have a formal designation.
Awesome, thank you. And then I guess the other question I was going to direct more towards Jen, and seeing just if she had any thoughts or any pro tips as far as when you were first coming out as an NP and looking at places to work. Did you ever negotiate contracts with your employer as far as loan repayment, or did you do most of your loan repayment solely through state and federal programs?
I negotiated a contract. I did not feel very well prepared to negotiate a contract. So that is one thing I think you should arm yourself with just a little bit more. So when I negotiated my contract, the way it was decided is they would provide me 2 checks every month. So I got like my salary check that we had agreed upon in my contract, plus another check that was designated for student loan repayment. And that seemed to be going fine until I got my W-2 with my contract salary, and then I got a 1099 with the second salary. So they took all of that out they didn't tax me on any of that. And so I had no children at that time, and I was not married. So I had no deductions at all. And I actually ended up having to pay money. So I think you definitely do your research on what's going to fit you best, and be a little bit more prepared than I was as far as taxing and what contract labor looks like versus like salaried, like employee labor. I think kind of, again, going in, know what your contract, when you want to negotiate, know what your worth it would be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I mean, just any of those insights were great as far as just the things that you're not really prepared for, that you're like, hey, I know that that's something I can negotiate after I figure out, after school, but I,
Yes.
don't actually know how to do it, and what is a reasonable ask versus an unreasonable ask, and things like taxes are, all things that typically
Taxes were the big one for me. I don't really think there's an unreasonable ask, especially if you feel like it's flexible and you're kind of like, you're not going to get it if you don't ask for it. So, I mean, if it's a non-negotiable for you, make that known. And if it's a negotiable thing, put it on the table and see what happens.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We have another question from Hannah. I'm unsure if the first part applies to you, Jennifer, but I'll go ahead and state the whole thing. She asked or said, in general, are there more people applying for these jobs than jobs are available? I am sure it will differ from place to place. Also, what was your orientation like, Jenna?
I think, are you meaning like people applying for rural jobs like the one I have? I have been recruiting, so I was going to mention that and I forgot. I have been recruiting for a nurse practitioner for a while. I went through 67 applications and I couldn't get a single person to come and visit. So they are people applying, I guess, but not seriously considering. So there's definitely work out there. There is competition, of course, but definitely not like applying for a place where the population is more dense. And I think you're right, it does differ from place to place, but that's my experience. I contacted 67 people. About 40 of them responded to an email when I reached out to them asking if they were actually interested and I'd like to speak with them over the phone. And then none of them would come for a visit. I showed you guys on a map where Walsh is over, and I spoke to a woman in Florida They were wanting to move to Colorado for the mountains. Walsh is not near the mountains, and some people don't realize that. And so I was very upfront. I don't think it's good to, let people show up and be taken aback when there's not a mountain here. And I told her the weather was, the day that she had called, it was quite windy. And so I told her that was our climate today. It's 70 degrees and the wind is blowing. And she goes, "Oh, I live on the ocean. It's an ocean breeze." I'm like, not quite an ocean breeze, but you should come and feel it. And she would never come for a visit. And then my orientation, because I was somewhat familiar, I worked with the medical director for part days while they were working on my credentialing. So once I finished my licensure, I wasn't quite ready to be billing things because I hadn't been accepted by insurance companies. There's kind of a period of time there where, things are kind of getting up and rolling. So I shadowed the medical director. So I kind of got to know what his style was like. It helped us build a better relationship. So I shadowed him a little bit, and then I shadowed the nurse practitioner. And then as soon as I was able to start scheduling patients, we kept my schedule rather light, about one patient per hour. And as I felt comfortable, we started increasing the number of patients I could see until I was seeing a full load of people. And then that is kind of how it went. Kim's mom actually had to have a kidney transplant when I had been here 7 months. And so by month 7, she took a month off and I was running the clinic by myself. So it was really feet first, make it happen.
Yeah, I've heard that about working in rural, is that you have a lot of opportunities to work in different areas and wear many different hats. Is that something it sounds like you've experienced?
For sure. I wear many, many hats in the clinic here. And I have grown tremendously in my field. The clinic is kind of my baby. I hire, I train, I do all sorts of things here, not just see patients.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Again, feel free to unmute yourselves, type something in the chat.
I have one more for Jen. And I guess you spoke to it a little bit, but I guess the concern for me, I mean, I'm just starting my NP schooling. And so I'd certainly have a little bit of a road ahead of me. And I currently live in a rural community. And I guess like trying to balance, how is it for you? It sounds like you were already living in Denver when you were going to school, but I just always think like that's interesting. Like working already as a nurse in a rural area, I get that I already wear a lot of hats, and as a practitioner, that's only going to increase.
Yes.
And is there any pro tips that you could say as far as preparing yourself in the time that you're in school, to be able to feel like when you get back to a rural area and you don't have as many of the resources that you would, potentially depend on, to kind of just be best prepared as you can to be a well-rounded practitioner?
I think being aware is the first thing. You're already kind of have a little bit of background knowledge. You know what's going to be asked of you. Always make time for yourself is a really big thing that sometimes we forget about in rural areas. The lines get really blurry at times as far as I'm at work, but yet my patients know me, have my phone number, we're at the church potluck. So sometimes being able to say no is one of the biggest things that I could take away. And then when I was in nurse practitioner school and working full time, that was the busiest time of my life. And I think just managing work, bills, being an adult, and having a job really kind of prepared me for when you stop being in school, those extra hats that you're going to fill in, they will just take the place of school. You'll already be managing it. You'll already have the tools you need.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Will and Jenna.
Hi, so I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you're saying it was harder to get the federal loan repayment? Is that because there are certain requirements for where you'll be working? because I'm looking at I believe, yeah, the handbook there you have on screen from my email, and it says that there are just registered nurses, and that's what I'm going for. And there are some that require masters and certain specifications. So is that something I would have to talk to that site about to see if I qualify?
So the federal is harder only in that they require a HPSA score that is indicative that it's a really health profession shortage area. So they want a HPSA score that is like really in need of those providers. It's not impossible to receive though. It's just at the state level, they welcome HPSA scores that are a little bit broader. But yes, so there is, if you go to, I can drop the link in the chat, but there is a website that you can search facilities, you can search counties, and you can see what that HPSA score is. So even if that clinic isn't hiring right now, or if you have one in mind or whatever, you can go and look up what their actual HPSA score is and see if it meets that qualification. I can't remember what the cutoff is for the national level, but it should be on their website. If not, again, Shanti Butcher would be your greatest asset there, and asking those questions for the national level.
Emily, are you referring to the Am I Rural tool where you can look up places and see?
I'm not sure about that one. It's just a HPSA score.
Okay. Claudia asked, are any of the repayment programs geared towards registered nurses? Emily? I believe so. Emily, are you there? We can't hear
Sorry.
you.
Yes, I had you minimized. So there is actually a nurse service corps as well. So that one is so there's the state and the state and the national, and those are kind of broad. But then dental, anyone in the dental field, there's some additional programs for them. And then there are some for not just, but for RNs that are not looking at that advanced practice provider level. And so there is a nurse service corps that you would be qualified for.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and drop that in the chat. Thanks, Claudia, for giving us that link here. So I'll go ahead and share that with everybody. All right, we'll go ahead and just leave the floor open for, another minute. If any other questions come in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourselves again, that's fine. We will be sending out, the questions that were asked during this presentation and the responses, and we'll share all of this information out with all of you, along with a recording of the presentation, so you can watch it later if you'd like. Thanks, Emily. Emily just put in the little like search engine to find HPSA scores.
Hi, this is Ryan. I have a question for Jenna in regards to, I guess the patient population, and is there a need to know Spanish or any other kind of additional things that aren't necessarily taught in nursing school or NP school?
Spanish would be a huge benefit. Yes, Spanish. That's really in our population, really the what you would need to know. There's lots of things, of course, that you learn when you get out of nurse practitioner school, but that, like, yes, knowing Spanish would be like wonderful. I wish I knew more.
Do you have interpreter services, or as if somebody isn't very proficient at Spanish, what kind of resources do you have?
We have a medical assistant that speaks Spanish, so she's able to translate for us. That's usually what we do.
we had just a comment shared by Faith. They said, I will, and this is for you, Jenna, I will be rotating with Stacy Bishop in Springfield this month in November. Super excited, and maybe we will cross paths.
Awesome. Stacy is wonderful. I've known her a long time. So tell her I said hello and maybe we'll see you or talk on the phone.
Right. Not seeing any other questions coming in. All right. Well, Emily and I are going to go ahead and share, just briefly go through that student presentation resource handbook that we emailed to all of you. So I'm going to pull that up just so you can all get an idea if you haven't opened it yet. So this is the student presentation resource handbook. And so it goes over some of our CRHC organizational resources, some of the work that we do as the State Office of Rural Health. Then we go into that facilities designations map.
Stephanie, if I can just jump in really quick.
Yeah.
I know we've put so many links in that chat, but I'm going to put just one more. It is actually a Survey Monkey. And so that environmental scan as one of our resources, what it is a, it's like 20 questions, but they're mostly multiple choice. And we send it out to the current workforce. And then this year we've added one in for students and residents. And it looks at recruitment and retention practices so that you guys as the incoming workforce are really getting, you know, the best of the best from our clinics. So it's just some helpful information. Your answers are anonymous. We analyze it and then we use that to build a recruitment and retention plan for our clinics. And so we look at what's currently going on, what you guys would like to see, so that we can really help drive our rural clinics forward. So if you wouldn't mind taking just a few minutes to complete that, doesn't have to be today. It's open until I believe the October 18th. So there's some time, but any information that you can provide would be very helpful to that. And those results will go out next year.
Great. Thanks, Emily. You'll have to share that link with me so I can add that in the follow-up email that we send to everybody. So then it goes into this map of rural health facilities within county designations. So you can see that it's color-coded for urban, rural, and frontier. It shows critical access hospitals, rural health clinics, and rural PPS hospitals. And then there's a page here for the Colorado State loan repayment options. There is also some scholarships here. I know it's tiny, but if you zoom in, you should be good. There's the Colorado Nursing Foundation Scholarship Program for students. So you could go ahead and apply for that if you're a student. And then it goes into the federal loan repayment options for the National Health Service Corps. And there's different options. Like we mentioned, there's the Nurse Corps loan repayment option, which is for registered nurses, advanced practice nurses, and nurse faculty. The SUD community loan repayment program that Emily mentioned, is that the substance abuse?
Substance use disorder. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then there's 3 scholarships for the National Health Service Corps. There's just their general scholarship program for students. That's for med students. They have their student to service program scholarship for students, and that's med students as well. And then the Nurse Corps scholarship program for students, and that's for student nurses. So there's a lot of helpful resources and all of the loan repayment and scholarship opportunities here. Then it goes into the application builders that Emily kind of highlighted and touched on earlier. We have some specific stuff for the Colorado Health Service Corps applications and the National Health Service Corps applications. And you can see Emily had highlighted this: trainings completed or volunteer work in community-based underserved settings, research related to access or research project for rural and underserved. So just some tips for your application builders. And then we've mentioned this throughout the presentation with through our net, the National Rural Recruitment and Retention network. So that is a job board for you to go and see what's out there for you. One more chat. Okay, thanks, Emily. There's the survey. If you could take a couple of minutes to fill that out, it's really helpful. That will be shared and noticed and recognized by rural health employers. So hopefully, you know, we can capture that so they can offer what you want and you can get what you want. I haven't seen any other questions come in. Emily, Jenna, is there any last any things you want to share or add or present? I can do that.
I don't believe so. Jenna, of course, I'll let you, if there's anything that you have, but otherwise, just again, thank you all for your time. If there's more questions, or if you just want more, you know, details about an open position or a community or a clinic, please feel free to reach out. We are a resource to you. We're not recruiters. Like I said, I'm a project manager, program manager. So it's just kind of one of the things that I do, but I am definitely available to answer anything or get you in contact with a person. I know the loan repayment stuff is a little bit complex, and I really like to refer that out to those that are directly involved so that I don't you know, direct you in the wrong place, but please let us know and we will get you there.
Yeah. Thanks, Emily.
And I don't have much to add, but if you think of a question that you think I could answer in the future, Emily and Stephanie know how to get in touch with me and they can direct it to me. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. All right, thank you all for attending this presentation. We'll be sharing out additional resources, the student resource handbook again. We'll send out the questions that were asked during the presentation as well as the responses, so you have that information. Send out a link to the job fair. We'll send out a link to the environmental scan as well as a recording of this presentation. So thank you all again and good luck in your future endeavors.